At least nature gives us the cure of distraction, so we don't have to feel too bad that we've just destroyed science, personal identity, and anything we thought we knew. Very much not your picture of nihilists, the goth punks hanging out at the mall way of thinking of nihilism, but actually surprisingly well-dressed people who just happened to assassinate Tsar Alexander. And they had this perspective that basically you also find in Nietzsche, that we need to burn down Russian society. And whatever survives destruction is the only thing worth keeping. So again, Nietzsche, almost at the exact same time, 1881, famously says, whatever does not kill me makes me stronger. And you have this also as a political message, right? Whatever doesn't kill society makes all of us stronger. So the Russian nihilists, they assassinate Alexander. And you can see here in the Brooklyn Daily Eagle, that they sort of are of two minds about it. On the one hand, we had Lincoln just be assassinated, so we're not super pro-assassination in the United States. On the other hand, we have a horrible, oppressive regime, autocrat. We can kind of understand why they'd assassinate him. So they're mixed bag. And what's fascinating historically, by the way, the nihilists then tried to do this again to the next Tsar. They got captured, hung, and their leader was the brother of Lenin. So again, they might have killed one member of the family, but not the one who would take out Russia after that. So another way, oh geez, that didn't work. Nihilism, another way of thinking about nihilism then is that not that believing nothing matters, but rather believing that what matters in contemporary society is actually nothing. So what everyone thinks is most important, what everyone cares most about is actually the wrong thing. And this would again be the political message, right? That our focus, our emphasis in life is on the wrong place. We need to change dramatically, radically what we're doing. And this is what Wendell Phillips was honoring, right? That this was, I apologize if any of you are British, but we did have this thing called the American Revolution, which historically I realized might have been a mistake because Canadians have a much better time going to London universities than I did. Anyway, but again, this idea, right, that honoring the King of England, that was wrong. That this wasn't what we should be doing, right? That what we should be doing instead, no taxation without representation, throw off the shackles of oppression, and fight for our own freedom. So what is again what Wendell Phillips was arguing, this is why America is a nihilistic country, that we are unwilling to take for granted that tradition matters. So this is another way of thinking about this. So this is the kind of world we get today. Everyone just calls everyone else a nihilist. Maybe this has happened to you. There's this thing called social media, if you haven't heard of it. But what's interesting, again, is that you could have this kind of perspective if you bring Nietzsche back into the mix. And again, I apologize for my fun with Photoshop. This isn't a photo. That Nietzsche is going to have a very specific understanding of nihilism. So it's, I think, important to take a step back philosophically. I know, big shock from a philosopher. And to think about, well, what is actually the philosophical theory of nihilism? Yes. So if we look at the history of nihilism in philosophy, we get a very specific story that I tried to tell in my nihilism book. So again, there are more details than what I'm going to tell you in 10 minutes. But in the beginning, you might have heard of this guy, Socrates. And you get Plato's Cave, Book 7 of the Republic, where famously, this is, I always love this when I talk to my students about this, because this is supposed to be like a dinner party conversation. And it's the Republic, right? So I do like this idea that ancient Greeks just had dinner for 3 days in a row. But this idea that, this argument about what is the nature of justice, as often happens if you've been to a dinner party, at some point comes down to someone saying, okay, well, imagine the nature of education and its state on our soul is something like this. There are people who are in an underground cave. They've been living there since birth. They're shackled. They're staring at nothing but shadows on a wall. And then the three most important words in the history of philosophy are said by Socrates: they're like us. So this is what is supposed to be our view of everyday life. This view that basically what we take to be life is nothing but staring at shadows on a wall, right? So there is truth, there is a realm of truth. It's just not the realm of experience. So importantly, you start to get this idea that there is the world we live in, and then the world we get to access either through a career in philosophy or death. Maybe it's not even an either or there. But again, this idea, very important, that there is truth out there, it's just not here. We're going to jump a little bit to everyone's favorite Descartes. You may have heard of Descartes' Meditations, where he famously said, "I think, therefore I am," except if you read it, he didn't say that. I apologize. Just like Darth Vader did not say, "Luke, I'm your father," Descartes did not say, "I think, therefore I am." So in the first meditation, Descartes is going through this crisis of knowledge, right? That I do not know anymore if I can trust anything I believe to be true, right? I have taken all of these beliefs from sense experience that I've later discovered were false. I have taken these beliefs from tradition that were later found to be false. But if I don't have sense experience to ground my knowledge, and I don't have tradition to ground my knowledge, then what do I have? So the first meditation ends with this moment of crisis. And interestingly, you get this moment here where he says, I am very much feeling like a prisoner who wants to just stay asleep, because while asleep, I get to feel free. And he says, basically, he's anti-woke. I know it's shocking from a 17th century philosopher, but he's really ahead of the game. But he said that I'm desperate to stay asleep. I am in pain when I'm awake. These questions that I've raised, they're too much for me. And so he says, I feel sleep coming on. I can't even control it. And this is how the first meditation ends, as basically a return descent into the cave, right? So it's like he's come out and says, nope, I would like to go back. So essentially, Cypher in the Matrix. Spoiler alert, I'm sorry. So again, you get this idea that we could seek truth, but isn't it just much nicer to stay in bed a little longer? You then get the biggest fan of Descartes that ever lived, David Hume, who was a very annoying 23-year-old, who went to Descartes' hometown and wanted to be the biggest fanboy he could and basically write fan fiction to Descartes. Except he said, Descartes, I was with you, radical skepticism. But then you did this dumb thing where you stopped being a radical skeptic, right? So it's like when Bob Dylan started playing electric and everyone was like, what's going on here, right? So it's like similar, right? David Hume says, no, we're stuck with radical skepticism. That's all we have, right? And he says that Descartes' mistake was thinking that we had this thing called cause and effect, and that we actually could ground that on knowledge. Hume says, no, that's just probability. We have inductive reasoning, not deductive reasoning. So the best we can do, he says famously, when playing a game of billiards, is you can say that, stick, ball, hole. But if someone said, why? How did that happen? Explain it to me. He says, all you can say is one thing followed from another, and this has happened every single time, but I do not have the necessary connection. He says, all I have is what he calls constant conjunction. So I can say this always happens, inductive reasoning. I cannot predict on that basis that it has to happen again. So he famously says, yes, the sun has risen. I cannot predict it will have to rise again. And so he says, well, it seems like we're screwed. But it's okay because I discover I really like drinking, and I really like playing backgammon with my friends. So this is how book one of his treatise ends, right? This idea that, well, at least nature gives us the cure of distraction, so we don't have to feel too bad that we've just destroyed science, personal identity, and anything we thought we knew. Then, thankfully, we have the grumpy 50-year-old Immanuel Kant, not going to let some 23-year-old tell him the nature of reality. So Immanuel Kant famously says, "I was awoken from my dogmatic slumber" by David Hume, right? So again, this sleep versus wakefulness way of thinking about the history of philosophy. And Kant, I apologize if this is I should have had a trigger warning. I was going to talk about Kant's first critique. So if you're familiar with German metaphysics, you should just leave now. But he basically wants to rescue knowledge from Humean skepticism, especially because as much as Hume is a fanboy of Descartes, Kant is a fanboy of Isaac Newton. And he really doesn't want to let Newton down with this whole, like, there actually is no science thing. So Kant says, oh, no, we can rescue cause and effect. Don't worry about it. We can say there is a melting candle and that the melting was caused. I just have to do this one neat trick where I divide reality into phenomena and noumena. And I say there's the world of appearance, and then there's the real world behind it. And I don't actually know anything about the real world behind it, but I do know appearances, and that's fine, and I can make all these reasoned judgments. Like, for example, I could say, well, something must have caused it, so cause and effect is okay. I just can't explain it. So that's his one neat trick for rescuing science, is to just divide basically science and life. So we can have science proceed as long as we bound rationality and, again, maintain a science of appearances, and we have this noumenal realm beneath it where we don't really know what's going on, but that's okay. This causes, it's important to realize this was a time in history called before the internet, where a philosopher could have such an impact that a novelist like Heinrich von Kleist could read Kant's Metaphysics and immediately kill himself. So again, that's the kind of impact Zizek dreams of. But it's again, you read Kant and you get this idea. Everything, this is all appearances, but there's a whole realm behind this, and I have no access to it. So I don't really know who any of you are. I just know how you kind of look. But also, I don't know what I really am. I just know how I kind of look. So what the hell is life then? So this causes this huge problem in German idealism and the world after that, where it does feel increasingly like science and everyday life have to go two separate ways. So you have this is more attractive Kant. So this is when you use the beauty filter. So this is Friedrich Jacobi, who after Kant actually coins the word nihilism. And he coins the word nihilism in this public letter he wrote to Gottlob Fichte, where he says, all of you Kantians out there are running around spreading a message that is essentially that life is meaningless. I call that nihilism. So this is where the word actually comes from. This is where it actually enters the lexicon.
To continue watching this video, click the link in the top left or in the description below. Or visit iai.tv for more debates and talks from the world's leading thinkers on today's biggest ideas.